one of the fake news groups this morning. Now, they were saying, what do you think President Trump had to do with it? I'll tell you what. Like, how about everything?
Well, I suppose he's got to give himself credit. The elite certainly won't. Evening, everyone. Welcome to The Next Revolution. I'm Steve Hilton, and this is the home of positive populism. Tonight, an unbelievable swamp watch. We'll take on a US senator whose hypocrisy on corruption and lobbying will take your breath away. Plus, stopped at the border, we'll bring you the latest on the immigration caravan, and Coulter will join us live to discuss that story and more. Also tonight, we'll debate the insane bureaucracy that's crushing childhood in America, and we'll be joined by the woman who's leading the revolution against our ridiculous risk-averse culture. But first, from Kanye West to the leaders of North and South Korea, Germany and France, President Trump got a lot of praise this week, and the USA saw a lot of results. Even one of his critics joined in.
I think he's taken action lately that has been good. I give him credit for that, the same way that I give him credit for the pressure that he's put on the North Koreans. I mean, look, my job is not to be a critic of Donald Trump. People don't understand that. I am not speaking out because somehow I want something politically. I'm worried about my country, and I'm worried about the divisions and the constant effort to continue to polarize us. But at the end, when the president deserves credit, when Donald Trump deserves credit, I'm going to give it to him. Why not?
So let me ask you about...
From Kasich to Kanye, a cultural icon, taking time out from praising himself this week to throw some love the president's way. First tweeting about the commander-in-chief, then dropping a new song about him.
I feel an obligation to show people new ideas, and if you want to hear them, they go to right here. Make America great again. Had a negative perception, I took it, boy. Rocket gave it a new direction. Added empathy, caring, love, and affection. And y'all simply questioning my methods.
He really does love that MAGA hat. Of course, none of that is music to the ears of the Trump-hating elite. Now, tell us what you think during the show as we discuss all this. Follow us at NextRevFNC and at Steve Hilton X. Here with me to discuss all these significant developments, former Bernie Sanders national staffer Tesla and Figaro, and Washington Times opinion editor and Fox News contributor Charlie Hurt, who did us the great honor of deciding to join us here instead of being with the elite there in the Correspondents' Dinner in Washington.
I've never had a better excuse to skip the Correspondents' Dinner. It's just such a, and I can't think of a, by reading the reports of it, I can't think of a better one to have skipped.
I know. Well, we'll get to that, I think, but let's just start with, I mean, there's a lot happened this week with the president and so on. Let's start with the really important and serious stuff, the foreign policy aspects. I mean, the things that we saw this week, not just Korea, which has been widely commented on for obvious reasons, but also I thought it was significant the way that he really made progress on the Iran issue with President Macron and with Angela Merkel, where, you know, just a few weeks ago, you had all the kind of foreign policy elites saying, hang on a second, you know, he doesn't know what he's talking about, ripping up the Iran deal, he's not going to get anywhere with that. They're coming around to his position, but they just can't give him any credit, can they?
No, and I don't think they ever will give him credit. One of the reasons I think it would be so delightful if he did bring peace to the Korean Peninsula is not that it would just save tens of millions of fellow humans, but then the Nobel Prize Committee would be forced to give him a Nobel Prize. But even they probably wouldn't do it. They would wind up giving it to Kim Jong-un. But it really is amazing, and it's a reminder of not, you know, we talk so much about domestically about what Donald Trump has meant in terms of sort of doing things differently, but my gosh, around the world, doing things, just doing things differently, maybe in some cases doing things worse than the way the establishment was doing it, but just doing things differently. It's a breath of fresh air, and where we have been having, you know, failure after failure, you know, decades of failure. Well, doing something different is the first step towards maybe finding the right solution.
Well, it tells it honestly. That's one of the main sort of things that he said was like, I'm just not, and that's what people saw. He's not going to be the usual kind of thing that people got used to. He's going to shake things up, do it his way. All the experts said it's going to be a disaster, particularly on foreign policy. It's going to be, you know, wreck the world. It's going to be a danger to the world. it's not really turning out like that, is it?
Well, I guess it's perception is reality in PR. I guess it depends on how you how you look at it. But what I would say is President Trump has been consistent on who Trump is. From the moment that he started running for office, nothing has really changed. I think what the bigger thing is that people really don't expect you to say you're going to be the same person and actually do it. Before he was elected, everyone said, oh, when he changes, when he gets in, he's going to be so presidential, he's going to be this, one, that. And I always tell people, when you get married, it's not about, oh, once we get married, maybe he's going to be different. It is who it is. He is who he is. And so if people don't like it, like even they talked about in the White House correspondent dinner, they brought in an interesting point. This is the monster that you guys created. This is who you wanted. This is who you put in office. So I think he's just been consistent with that. I also would say, I'm sure, he's listened to some counsel, around him. Him not doing foreign policy before, outside of business. We can't assume that he hasn't, tapped into his resources. We really don't know. But I think it's back to just what you said, whether it's good or bad or, whatever it is, people are going to remain critical because he continues to go outside of the box and not doing what we are used to seeing a president do.
And what do you make of the Kanye West thing? I mean, again, widely discussed this week. What was interesting to me was when you saw the backlash from the left about Kanye. Suddenly, he wasn't really black anymore. He was rich. And so it's okay, we can hate him because he's rich, and that's why he's with Trump. It's really interesting to me the way the response from the left came into that Kanye thing.
Well, there's two perspectives. One, I'm a poet, and I'm a hip-hop head. So when I speak, I'm certainly not speaking for all poets, all hip-hop, and all African-Americans, but I thought you raised the interesting point about being rich. But let me break down to you what hip-hop's problem was.
Right.
First, hip-hop has a problem with anybody being rich. In fact, I tell rappers all the time, most of you are more Republican than you think. You either are talking about getting rich or you're already rich. So hip-hop has no problem, with being rich. But what Kanye did was him coming, especially from the conscious poet game, him being a conscious poet and turning into a rapper and speaking about consciousness. Once you've been deemed as bad for the African-American community, it is always going to be, I get criticized for coming on Fox, no matter, even if I'm saying things that people believe, even if they say right on, you're right on point, it doesn't matter because Fox has been deemed already everything against what's helpful for me and my people, just being very honest.
Yeah.
So by Kanye stepping outside of that and saying, listen, I want to be a free thinker. I want to have more dialogue, across the table to have this conversation. I tell people all the time, somebody got to go to Fox. Somebody has to have the conversation.
Right. Well, I'm very glad it's you.
Yeah, and so because of that, because he came out and did something different and said, let's have this conversation, it is particularly with hip-hop and with African Americans, he's being criticized because he's supposed to be the epitome of consciousness. Hip-hop started with talking about the struggle, talking about it's like a jungle sometimes, maybe wonder how I keep from going under. So for him to come and actually talk about capitalism, talking about free capital, talking about Second Amendment, all the things that hip-hop preaches on a daily basis, Steve, my issue with Kanye is how he really rolled it out. If he wants to support Trump or support Trump administration policies that do work, which is business owners, like I'm one, which is free capital, which is free trade, all of those things, rolling it out that way opposed to I'm just wearing a hat and I'm trying to
that's a really good
make
point.
it more of a gimmick is the problem, which why it won't be received because he's not focusing on issue, he's talking about emotion.
That's such a great point, and I always think that's right. We've got to come back to the agenda that he ran on and whether or not he's doing it. But Charlie, I thought it was really interesting what Teslim was saying there is about, actually it picks up on what Kasich was saying, of all people, which is this, this incredible polarization and division and anger and hate. And he's reaching out of that. He's trying to get out of the boxes and actually have a conversation.
Well, that was the funny thing about the campaign. If you read the media, you'd think that it was the most polarizing campaign and all this kind of stuff. The truth is, there was a lot of polarization going on. But two things. Donald Trump's campaign was the most issue-oriented presidential campaign I've ever covered. And that goes back a few years. The second thing is that those issues, as you pointed out, were very unifying issues. They were talking about things like freedom, breaking down, the bureaucratic barriers and things like that. And all of that, it doesn't matter what color you are. These are all very popular messages. And then, of course, the final message, all the government, has not been good to all the communities that it claims to be good to. And that was why I think that message that he delivered to African Americans, that look, what have you got to lose, was such a profound message.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, we could sort of debate all that for a long time, but I just think that I know that there's a risk that, you know, we make too much of, you know, one event, but there is something interesting happening here, I think, with this, with the way that the Kanye West intervention, as it were, has kind of sparked this debate. I think it's really interesting. Anyway, thank you both. Coming up in Swamp Watch tonight, a Democrat senator blasts Republicans over lobbying. But just wait until you hear his own links to lobbyists. And the migrant caravan reaches the United States border. Ann Coulter joins me on that next.
Are you watching that mess that's going on right now with the caravan coming up? Are you watching this?
Well, we're certainly watching. Welcome back to The Next Revolution. Breaking tonight, Customs telling a caravan of migrants from Central America that the San Diego port of entry has reached full capacity. Hundreds of men, women and children have gathered there seeking asylum, many claiming that they're looking to escape gang violence. They're likely going to try again tomorrow to cross into the United States. The Trump administration has called the group a threat and is urging those families to go through proper legal channels. Joining me now is syndicated columnist Ann Coulter. Ann, how are you doing? Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Steve.
All right, so I suspect you've got a lot to say about this. Let's go with what's going on down there in at the border right now with a caravan. What's your take on the caravan and what the Trump administration is doing about it?
Well, I wish Trump would just stay on the road like he was in campaign mode again, because he gets instant feedback from the crowd, and that's when he says really popular things that get Republicans elected and could possibly defend against a blue wave. But then he gets back to Washington, and he's not doing anything about the caravan. I mean, he sent out a tweet a few weeks ago saying, "Oh, don't worry. Thanks, Mexican government has stopped the caravan," and then the Daily Mail goes to Mexico and says, "No, we haven't stopped the caravan. We're giving them 30-day passes, 20-day passes to make sure that they can make it to America." They're not all traveling with the caravan anymore, but they're spreading out so they can go to different access points. They are 100% still coming. All they have to do is step across the border. Oh, and they have lots of lawyers from countries without borders advising them. This is a political attack on our nation by a political group that doesn't believe nations should have borders. They're advised, they're told what to say, they step across the border, they say asylum, and that's it. They're going to get shipped in, and we'll get another round of MS-13 and another round of MS-13. I mean, Trump has a lot of power. Yeah. He was the one who was elected. It's Republicans and Congress that the American people hate. If he wants Congress to pass this law, it wouldn't be very hard. Maybe if he spent a little more time on making America great again and not working on making South Korea and China great again, he could get back to pressuring Congress to do something for the American people. And that would be pass a law saying you don't just get to step in and say, "I'm claiming asylum," and then get a bus and a box lunch into America.
And then there's also the point about the wall. I mean, these pictures, I can't think of anything that's a more direct argument for what he was saying all along, which you know, doesn't seem to be happening.
No, and I mean, there's a reason that became the chant. If you go back and look at his famous, you know, Mexican rapist speech announcing his candidacy, he talks about a lot of things. He threw out tax cuts, Obamacare, the military, blah, blah, blah. It was from going out and giving these speeches and having, you know, a 10,000-person focus group every day of the campaign that he saw which lines were the popular ones. Well, there's a reason that the American people, unlike the donors, wanted a wall. A wall is the only thing that will work. You don't check with the people whose jobs are going to be made obsolete to find out if they need a wall. No, we just need drones and more border police. No, we want a wall for a reason, to stop the heroin, to stop the caravans, and he has 100% power to build a wall. He's the commander-in-chief. His duty is, his number one duty is to protect the borders. It's not to resolve North and South Korea's, you know, dispute. That's not our problem. North Korea is China's problem. The Syria is Europe and France's problem. Mexico is our problem. So, I mean, are European newspapers consumed with what's going to happen with Mexico and the caravan? Are Chinese and South Korean newspapers worried about illegal immigrants coming into America and draining our people dry? No, they aren't. Why are we worried about their problems? That was the whole point of Make America great again.
You're very you are the true purist. I love it. So listen, you mentioned jobs earlier. You noticed something in the president's rally last night that was very interesting. Hasn't got picked up that much. Let's play it, and I'll get your reaction on the other side.
And for the farmers, okay, it's going to get good. And we're going to let your guest workers come in, because we're going to have strong borders, but we have to have your workers come in. You know, the unemployment picture is so good, it's so strong, that we have to let people come in. They're going to be guest workers. They're going to come in. They're going to work on your farms. We're going to have the H-2Bs come in. We're going to have a lot of things happening, but then they have to go out. Then they have to go out.
So what's that about?
Well, please first notice that it's dead silence through that entire blather until he gets to, and then they're going to have to go out. That's why I want him giving speeches nonstop so he can get this feedback. I don't know what this is about. You tell me, because the way I remember it, we did not elect Jeb Bush. I was completely sure we elected Donald Trump. Where he gets this nonsense, and the H-2B visas he's talking about are absolutely the worst you could possibly come up with. They aren't farm workers, and by the way, the farmers can build robots. I don't know if you've ever used an ATM, but maybe it's time for farmers to move into the 20th century. Leaving that aside, that's not what H-2B visas are. It's for working at places like Mar-a-Lago, working at in entertainment and resorts and restaurants and construction. The most important jobs, I would add, now that, you know, he and Kanye are bonding, the most important jobs for African Americans. I mean, he gave that beautiful speech in Milwaukee saying to African Americans, what have the Democrats given you? Give us a chance. This is how you would give African Americans and, you know, all working class Americans a chance. They didn't ask for a tax cut. They asked for jobs. These are jobs. And he's standing up at a rally promising to bring in H-2B workers. That was the whole Disney thing. Remember, that was a big deal during the debate. It hurt Marco Rubio.
Yes.
And it's going to hurt Trump.
Totally
I mean, I hear these speeches, and all I can see is a huge blue wave, a blue tsunami. But there is still time. Trump can bring it back. One piece of good news. I'm sorry, I'm going on like this endless monologue, but one piece of good news, Steve, is yesterday's New York Times had an article saying that Trump is disregarding the advice from the loser Republicans, i.e. Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell, to talk about tax cuts. Because he finds those issues boring, and he would prefer to talk about immigration and trade. I am 100% with the president on that, and that's the only way to stop a blue wave.
A lovely moment of unity to end on. Anne, thank you so much. See you soon.
Thank you.
Coming up next, a new law in Utah fights back against the bureaucrats ruining childhood in America. It's called free-range parenting. And the woman behind it all joins me live next.
Every day I wake up and I think, who knows what's going to happen? Not only through the day, but in the next hour. We're 24/7 news, but we're really down to the minute. So our job is to cut through the talking points, no matter the party, no matter the ideology, to try to get the bottom line truth of the day. You take a deep breath, you realize you're in the moment, and do your...
Welcome back, everyone. My next guest sparked a nationwide debate a decade ago when she made the decision to leave her 9-year-old son in a Manhattan department store with nothing but a map, a subway card, $20 and quarters for a payphone, trusting that he'd find his own way home. After calling her parenting style free range and publishing her story, Lenore Skenazy was hailed as a mom who gave her kid independence and criticized for her decision even being labeled as America's worst mom. But now Lenore's parenting style is the basis of a new Utah law which allows children to engage in independent activities like walking, running, biking to and from school, traveling to stores and parks, playing outside and staying home unattended. State welfare officers can no longer take children away from their parents if they're caught doing such activities, as long as the children are adequately fed, clothed and cared for. Here now with more, the president of Let's Grow and founder of Free Range Kids, Lenore Skenazy. Lenore, I've been dying to talk to you you for so long. I'm so happy that you're here. I absolutely love what you're doing. I'm not going to hide it. This is not a neutral debate.
Fanboy.
Could you just start by just explaining in your words, what's the problem that you're trying to solve here? What are you fighting against?
I'm fighting against a culture that thinks children are in constant danger from literally everything they see, eat, read, hear, do, and especially that they're in danger anytime they're unsupervised. Somehow we've come to believe that if a kid is walking down the street or waiting briefly in a car or comes home with a latchkey, they're automatically in danger, whereas if they were with an adult, somehow they're not. And that's actually enslaving both the kids and the moms who have to be with them all the time, and the kids who get zero independence, which I don't think is a great way to raise kids.
So you're describing a sort of a big change in the culture as this has got worse and worse. Have there also been things that the government or law or whatever, you know, like sort of official ways in which this problem has been made worse?
Yes, if the assumption becomes that any time a child isn't with an adult, they're automatically in danger, that means that whoever has allowed the child to be independent, to walk home, I was allowed to walk home at age 5, nobody was arresting my mom, but now if it's considered dangerous, well then of course you go and arrest the mom, because what kind of mother puts her kid in danger? And so people have, I got a call this morning, I got an email from a woman who had let her kid wait in the car for a few minutes while she went into a grocery, and she came out and she was arrested. She was taken to the station house. She was actually handcuffed to the bench, she told me. I have to get to the bottom of this.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, but the point is that the government, when there are authorities who really believe that an unattended child is automatically an endangered child, they are allowed to investigate the parents, they're allowed to arrest the parents, and we've all heard stories of this. There's the famous story in Maryland of the Métis who let their children 10 and 6. 10 years old was the age of my crossing guard, but now 10 and 6 weren't even allowed to walk home from their little local park in Silver Spring. And then there's the case of Deborah Harrell, a working single mom.
Oh, yes.
You remember this story?
Yeah, terrible story.
It was a terrible story. So normally her daughter would come with her every day while she worked during the summer. I mean, she worked all the time, but the kid was off during the summer. 9-year-old girl would come and sit at McDonald's while her mom worked the shift, and she would play on her computer. Well, her computer was stolen in a burglary, and so she asked her mom, how about I go to the sprinkler park instead? There's so many kids. There's a lunch program there. It's really fun. It's boiling hot. It's South Carolina. I'm 9. And the mom said, okay, take a phone. You know, if you need me, call. And the girl went there for a couple days in a row. Third day in a row, some lady said, where is your mother, little girl? And she said, my mom's working, that's why I have a phone. And the woman called 911. And not only was Deborah Harrell arrested, not only did she spend the night in jail, her child was taken away from her for 17 days because of endangerment. And frankly, it's not endangerment to say my kid is old enough to play in the park, I'm going to let her. It's a beautiful summer day. So you can't have the government allowed to arrest good parents making rational, statistically safe decisions.
Absolutely. Right. Well, I put my cards on the table. Charlie, I think you might just agree with this, but tell us what you think.
I absolutely agree with every bit of it. You know, if I were to list the problems we have in society today, you know, it's a lack of independence, a lack of responsibility in people, especially, you know, not just children, but when you get to college-age kids. And you don't get there unless you give kids responsibility and independence. And is it a risk? Absolutely. You know, I'd love to bubble wrap my kids and never let them, but that would be you're never going to grow up that way. But one thing but you know, beyond just children, I'm amazed at the college level, the degree to which you see this infantilization of kids. I read a story a couple of weeks ago about the Penn State Outing Club, which has been sponsoring outdoor events since 1920. They shut it down. The university shut it down because going outside is too dangerous.
I know, that was amazing. So I just want to get Teslin in
Yes.
Lenore just a second. What was your...
Well, I'm a mother of a 10-year-old daughter, so this for me is a tough story. You know, I do think that people should be allowed to raise their children as they want to. For example, when we had to deal with the spanking issue, are you allowed to spank a child or not spank a child? You know, what is abuse? I grew up old school. I also was a latchkey kid. You know, my mother worked 10 professions, wasn't on welfare, wasn't on the government. She worked. So when I came home from school, I was by myself at 10 years old. I locked the door and I stayed in the house. I'm not a big fan personally of having my child in public places by herself, and not because I'm afraid of being independent, but I've had things, you know, happen to me as a child at 10 years old. I'm not just concerned about an abduction or what the statistics say, but when you look at pedophiles, when I look at inappropriate situations that have even happened with me as a child. Those are things that I look at when I'm sending my little girl, you know, into the world, into the public place. So I think each parent has the right to decide what they want to do, and the government has to decide what is endangerment. Is that when we're talking about clothing or we're talking about shelter and so forth? But it is a very tough subject for me to have, because I wouldn't send my child on a subway and say, let's figure out if you can get back and use 2 quarters for a non-existent payphone. I don't even know who has a payphone.
I think you make a good point, which is that, you know, in the end, the bias should be in favor of, you know, trusting the parent to make the decision rather than the state enforcing a very risk-averse view. But Lenore, I just wanted to take it to, you know, bring it up to date really with this law that's been passed in Utah. Tell us about that and the significance of that, and what you'd like to see happen next.
So the law is called the Free Range Parenting Law, and it basically says that it's there's no cause for the government to get involved if a child is, you know, parents are not blatantly disregarding their child's safety and welfare, but if the kid is walking to school or playing outside and the government gets a 911 call, whether it goes to Child Protective Services or the cops, they say, okay, is the child okay? And the answer is yes. They say, well, thank you very much, and they don't have to proceed. And if you ask me, that's great, because I'm happy Child Protective Services exist and that the cops are out there, but I want them investigating cases where children really are in danger, where somebody has left the child alone in a house full of drugs, or they're pimping out their child, not when they've made a decision, you know what, I'm going to be an hour late today, you go home and I'll meet you there, please, you know, don't set the house on fire. And statistically, the child is at least as safe walking home as driving them home, and we don't arrest parents for putting their kids in danger when we drive them, even though the #1 way kids die is as car passengers. So we really have to have laws that are based on reality. We can't just say, oh, it's so scary out there, I'm going to arrest any parent who lets their kid play outside. That's a law based on hysteria, not fact.
So, Lenore, thanks. Just a quick comment from both of you. I mean, I like the idea that we can actually turn this culture around by, you know, things like this law in Utah. It's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lenore is exactly right. If they're, you know, the cops should be arresting the pedophiles and putting them away forever. But the importance of teaching responsibility, if you believe in self-governance, and we all do, then you're not going to have a society that is able to govern itself unless you have responsible, independent, thinking adults or youngsters becoming adults.
Doesn't last word.
Just as a mother, I mean, I trust my 10-year-old. I think she's extremely responsible. She does what I tell her to do, but there's just some situations that I just don't want a chance. But I don't need the government telling me what that situation should or should not be.
I think that's exactly. I think we all agree about that. Lenore, thank you so much for joining us tonight, but also for all the campaigning you've done over the years. It's incredibly important, and I'm so happy that the progress is being made. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for having me on, and thanks for all the tweets.
It's a pleasure. Coming up next, exclusive new details about the swampy ties of the senator who attacked Mick Mulvaney over lobbyists. We'll tell you who he is and what he's done after the break. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau Director Mick Mulvaney made headlines this week with his blunt confirmation of what we all suspected was true in the D.C. swamp. Talking about his time in Congress, he said, "If you're a lobbyist who never gave us money, I didn't talk to you. If you're a lobbyist who gave us money, I might talk to you." Since then, an investigation by the Daily Beast has revealed that Mulvaney's still at it, even with his powerful new job in the White House. At least 8 registered lobbyists and 6 other executives who donated to his congressional campaigns or whose companies' political action committees donated to him got a meeting with Mulvaney after he became budget director. Now, of course, that's outrageous. It totally undermines the president's Drain the Swamp agenda, and it needs to stop. Unsurprisingly, many people got on the Mick Mulvaney bashing bandwagon this week. Among them was Democratic Senator from Pennsylvania, Bob Casey. He tweeted, "This is supposed to be a government by the people, for the people, not a government of the thieves and money changers. Mick Mulvaney is a disgrace." Interesting. I kind of agree. And obviously, Senator Bob Casey would never issue such a thundering denunciation of Mick Mulvaney's lobbyist ties if he himself took money from lobbyists, would he? I mean, that would be so shamelessly hypocritical. It's too much, even for the swamp. But we just thought we'd check, you know, to be safe. Senator Bob Casey is this week's Swamp Watch. As we just showed you, Senator Casey raged against Mick Mulvaney over donations from lobbyists. We'll get to that in a moment, but here's a little appetizer for you. The first thing you notice when looking for Bob Casey's ties to the swamp is the way his staffers spin round Washington's corrupt revolving door. Nathan Steinwald was a legislative assistant for Casey from 2007 to 2009 before joining Sternhell Group as a lobbyist in 2013. Sternhell Group has brought in more than $8 million in lobbying contracts since Steinwald joined, including for finance and healthcare or pharmaceutical companies. That's handy, given Bob Casey's membership of the Senate Finance Committee and the Senate Health, Education, Labor and Pensions Committee. Another Casey staffer named Jared Solomon served as Vice President of Budget Policy at an advocacy group called First Focus from 2011 to 2014. Solomon left that job to work as a legislative assistant for Senator Casey for 4 years, and then he left Senator Casey to become a lobbyist for Bo's Public Affairs Group. His clients have included the American Indian Higher Education Consortium and the Coalition of Higher Education Assistance Organizations. Of course he lobbied for education interests. His former boss serves on the Senate committee that oversees education policy. That's how it all works in the swamp. And then there's Casey Gillette, a former Casey staffer, who's been through the revolving door so many times, I don't know how she's not dizzy. She started as a staffer for Senator Bob Graham in 2000 before leaving to become the Assistant Director of Government Relations at the National Audubon Society in 2004. The next year, she went back to Washington, working for Senators Debbie Stabenow, Bob Casey, and Harry Reid. In Harry Reid's office, she worked as his policy advisor for agriculture. So, of course, she left that job to become a lobbyist for Monsanto. Don't you love the way Bob Casey attacks Mulvaney over lobbying when so many of his own staffers are cashing in on their experience in his office to peddle influence on K Street? But hang on a second, you might say those are just his staffers. Senator Casey himself isn't part of the swamp. He's obviously clean as a whistle. Otherwise, he'd never have called Mick Mulvaney a disgrace, would he? Would he? Take a look at this chart. It shows the business sectors that have donated to Senator Casey's campaign since 2013. Two of the sectors with the highest donations are industries he specifically regulates as part of his committee assignments, including $1.58 million from the finance, insurance and real estate sector and $1.22 million from the health sector. But you may say, that's just what goes on in Congress. We know it's all basically corrupt. Senator Casey was incensed about something much more specific: donations from lobbyists. There's no way he'd go on the warpath about donations from lobbyists if he actually did the same thing. Would he? Oh, look. According to the Center for Responsive Politics, on April the 25th, 2017, Senator Casey took a $2,700 donation from Ben Barnes, a lobbyist. On June the 14th, 2017, he took a $2,500 donation from David Castagnetti, another lobbyist. And on March the 20th, 2017, he took $500 from the Podesta Group. No need to tell you what they did for a living. Casey took money from Alpine Group, a lobbying firm whose clients include pharmaceutical giant Amgen and healthcare giant Centene Corporation, both directly affected by the Senate Health Committee, which Casey serves on. He took money from Capital Tax Partners, a lobbying firm whose clients include the National Council of Farmer Co-ops, who just might be interested in the fact that Senator Casey serves on the Agriculture, Nutrition and Forestry Committee. He also took money from Capital Council, which lobbies for Amalgamated Bank. Bob Casey is on the Senate Finance Committee. All told, sanctimonious, holier-than-thou Senator Casey took 198 donations from 136 lobbyists just in the 2018 election cycle. Here are their names, scrolling on the screen. This giant hypocrite, so eager to jump down Mick Mulvaney's throat for taking money from lobbyists, himself took $177,000 from lobbyists in the 2018 election cycle, $82,000 from lobbyists in the 2016 cycle, and $293,000 from lobbyists in the 2012 cycle. It all adds up to a grand total of more than $675,000 from lobbyists in his Senate career. Who knows what favors he did in exchange for all that cash? Well, we want to find out. And so we'll be submitting a Freedom of Information request to see who he and his staff have met with and what was discussed. We invited Senator Casey to come on the show and answer to you for all this. But he turned down our offer and instead gave us this statement. Mick Mulvaney admitted to selling access to him and his office in exchange for donations, while Senator Casey is working to pass the reforms that will get money out of politics. The difference could not be clearer. Notice that he doesn't deny selling access to him and his office. Senator Casey, you are the disgrace. You preach about getting money out of politics while pocketing hundreds of thousands of dollars from lobbyists and millions of dollars from industries that you regulate. You make me sick, and the sooner you're kicked out, the better. Phew. I'm angry about this guy. Sorry about that. Coming up, the panel has been listening. Let's see if they're steamed up about it too. Their thoughts on this week's Swamp Watch. Next. All right, welcome back, everyone. I've calmed down a bit. Let's have a sort of rational discussion around this and take it down a notch. What do you make of all this?
Well, obviously, Mick Mulvaney is the description that that he described there. He's a whore, but everybody in Washington is a whore for money, and the only difference is, he's a whore, and then Bob Casey's a lying whore, and anybody that denies that that's how it works in Washington is not telling the truth.
Well, I guess he was pretty blunt with that. I mean, we do agree when it comes to that. I mean, at some point, somebody's compromising something, whether they're Democrat, Republican, left, right. That's why I'm an independent, just to be quite honest with you. I don't see anybody just completely with clean hands. There's elected officials who do a little bit more, than others. The question really comes down to, what are you compromising for the people? Who are you lying in front of, your constituents, saying one thing and doing another? And the hypocrisy exists all across the board. Even when talking about Kanye yesterday, you're talking about one thing and rapping about another. The point is hypocrisy all the way across the board. And until we get some type of common sense, some type of consensus on the things that we believe in, and the things we want to push, and what we're willing to do, anything to win, to do anything to win, or do everything to win. That's really what it comes down to. And lying, flat out lying to your constituents, and then doing one thing and another. And I think that's where the conflict comes in.
And the weird thing about it is that it creates sort of a perverse, the money in politics creates a perverse incentive where you have people, both sides, they're trying to get power. They're not trying to solve problems, because if you solve problems, then all of your source of money goes away. They don't need to pay you to fix the problem anymore. And so you have, and this is on both sides of the aisle. On both sides of the aisle, you have people they pay lip service to wanting to fix problems, but whatever they do, don't ever fix it, because we don't ever want to. We don't want the cash cow to drive.
So there was a phrase that the then candidate Donald Trump used in the, if the audience will remember, he talked about Jeb Bush and Hillary and others as being the puppets of their donors. I thought it was really, really simple and clear phrase, the puppets of the donors. They would argue, Casey and all of the others, that they're not the puppets. They need the money for the campaigns, and they would do the things they do, the votes they cast or whatever anyway, and they just happen to align